Welcome back, everyone. If you are new here, grab your seat and hold on tight, because what you are about to hear is not just a story. It is a confession, a collision of two broken worlds, and a love so quiet and so fierce that it nearly destroyed both of them before it could save either one. Stay with me, because in the next few minutes something is going to happen in this story that you will not see coming. And by the time we reach the end, I promise you, your heart will feel something it has not felt in a long time. The morning of October the 3rd began like every other morning in Marcus Webb's life. Loud, chaotic, and slightly smelling of burnt toast. His daughter Lily, 7 years old, with 2 uneven pigtails and a gap where her front tooth used to be, was already spinning around the kitchen in her pink socks, singing a song she had made up herself about a princess who fought dragons with a spatula. Marcus stood at the stove in a wrinkled gray t-shirt and old jeans, flipping pancakes with one hand and tucking his phone between his ear and shoulder with the other, trying to confirm a work shift at the construction site downtown. He was 34 years old, broad-shouldered, with tired eyes that still managed to carry warmth in them. The kind of man who looked like he had been carrying something heavy for a very long time but had never once thought about putting it down. Because he couldn't. Because Lily needed him. Lily was everything. 3 years ago, Marcus's wife Elena had walked out of their apartment on a Tuesday evening, leaving nothing behind except a short note on the kitchen counter, $200 in an envelope, and a silence so total that Marcus had stood in the middle of the hallway for what felt like an hour before Lily's crying from the bedroom had pulled him back into the world. He had never fully understood why Elena left. She had said she was suffocating, that she needed something bigger than the life they had built, that she was sorry but she could not keep pretending. Marcus had read that note so many times in the weeks that followed that he had memorized every word, every curve of her handwriting, searching for something he might have missed, some clue that would explain it all. But there was nothing more to find. She was gone, and he was left with a 4-year-old daughter and a grief so raw and so private that he never spoke of it to anyone. He got through it the only way he knew how, by getting up every single morning, making breakfast, dropping Lily at school, going to work, picking her up, making dinner, reading her a bedtime story, and then sitting alone in the quiet of the apartment long after she had fallen asleep, staring at the ceiling until his body finally surrendered to exhaustion. He did this every day for 3 years without complaint, without self-pity, without ever once telling Lily that some nights he felt so hollow that the only thing keeping him anchored was the sound of her breathing through the baby monitor. He still kept on his nightstand even though she was 7 years old and had asked him twice already to take it away. He was not a perfect man. He was not rich or ambitious or particularly polished. He made $15 an hour at the construction site and supplemented it on weekends by doing odd jobs. Fixing leaky pipes, painting fences, assembling flat-pack furniture for people in the neighborhood who couldn't figure out the instructions. He lived frugally, kept his head down, loved his daughter completely, and asked for very little from the world. This was Marcus Webb. Simple, steady, invisible to most people who passed him on the street. But what happened on the morning of October the 3rd was about to make him impossible to ignore, and then, in a way that no one could have predicted, impossible to find. The construction site where Marcus worked was located just 3 blocks from the headquarters of Harlow and Associates, one of the most powerful corporate consulting firms in the city. The building was all glass and steel, 42 floors rising above the river, the kind of structure that was designed to make ordinary people feel small. Inside the building, on the 38th floor, lived the world of Diana Harlow, the 39-year-old CEO who had built the company from a single-room office with 2 employees into an empire worth $800 million. Diana was the kind of woman that business magazines wrote cover stories about. Brilliant, ruthless when necessary, immaculately dressed, always the smartest person in any room she entered. She had thick dark hair she wore pulled back in a severe bun, sharp cheekbones, and dark eyes that could hold a boardroom captive with a single glance. She had been described in print as magnetic, formidable, and relentlessly focused. What the magazines never wrote about was the fact that Diana Harlow had not taken a single vacation day in 4 years, that she regularly worked past midnight and arrived before dawn, that she ate most of her meals alone at her desk, and that she had not laughed, genuinely, unguardedly laughed, in so long that she could no longer remember what it felt like. She had no family nearby. Her parents had retired to a small town in Vermont, and their relationship was cordial but distant, The kind of politeness that develops between people who love each other but have never quite known how to say so. She had no husband, no children. She had had relationships over the years, serious ones, but they had all eventually collapsed under the weight of her schedule and her relentless drive. Men who had come into her life full of admiration and left full of frustration, feeling like they were competing for second place behind a company. She had long since stopped trying. The company was her life, her identity, her entire world, and she had convinced herself, with tremendous discipline and very little examination, that this was enough. This was everything. On the morning of October the 3rd, Diana left her apartment building at 6:58 in the morning, as she did every day. She was dressed in a charcoal gray blazer and slim black trousers, her bag over one shoulder, her phone in her hand, already reading through emails as she walked. She was due at the office at 7:30 for a call with investors in London, followed by 3 consecutive meetings, a lunch she would not actually eat, and an afternoon packed with decisions that affected hundreds of people's lives and livelihoods. She walked quickly, as she always did, cutting through the park along the river because it was 2 minutes faster than the main road, barely noticing the joggers and dog walkers and early morning commuters who moved through the space around her. She was halfway through the park when it happened. She had felt a little off since the previous evening. A slight tightness in her chest she had attributed to stress, a faint dizziness she had dismissed as too much caffeine and not enough water. She had taken an antacid before bed and told herself she would schedule a checkup soon, the same way she had been telling herself she would schedule a checkup for the past 2 years. She was walking and reading her phone and thinking about the London call when her vision suddenly fractured at the edges, when her legs became something foreign to her, something that no longer obeyed her instructions, and then the ground came up to meet her with a violence that knocked the phone from her hand and the breath from her body. And then there was nothing. And this is where the story changes forever. Because Marcus Webb was cutting through the same park on his way to the site, thermos in one hand, hard hat tucked under his arm, thinking about whether he had packed enough of Lily's lunch and whether the weather was going to hold. He saw it happen. He saw the woman in the gray blazer crumple to the ground, and he was already running before his brain had fully processed what his eyes were seeing. He dropped to his knees beside her, and the first thing he said, loudly, urgently, to no one in particular and everyone around, was those 4 words. She's not breathing. She's not breathing. People stopped. A jogger froze. A woman walking her dog went pale and reached for her phone. And Marcus, who had taken a basic CPR course 6 years ago when Lily was born because he had been terrified of emergencies and had wanted to be prepared. Marcus placed his hands on the center of Diana Harlow's chest and he began. He worked with a focus so complete, so total, that the world around him ceased to exist. He counted compressions in his head, tilted her chin, breathed for her, pressed again, counted again, breathed again. He did not know who she was. He did not know she was worth $800 million. He did not know that she ran one of the most powerful firms in the city. She was just a woman on the ground who was not breathing, and he was the person who happened to be there, and he was not going to let her die in a park on a Tuesday morning. It took 4 minutes and 20 seconds. An eternity in moments like this, before Diana Harlow pulled in a ragged, desperate breath that sounded like a door being thrown open in a silent house. The small crowd that had gathered released a collective exhale. The jogger who had been calling emergency services told the dispatcher she was breathing. She's breathing. Marcus sat back on his heels and pressed the back of his hand to his mouth and felt something in his chest unknot itself. Something he hadn't known was tied. The ambulance arrived 3 minutes later. The paramedics took over, asked Marcus what had happened, how long she had been down, what he had done. He answered everything clearly and calmly. When they asked for his name for the report, he gave it. When they asked if he was family, he said no, just someone passing by. And then they loaded Diana Harlow into the ambulance, and Marcus Webb picked up his thermos from the grass where he had dropped it, straightened up, looked once more at the ambulance as its lights disappeared around the corner of the park path, and walked the rest of the way to the construction site. He was 11 minutes late. His supervisor gave him a look. Marcus said he was sorry. Something came up. He put on his hard hat and went to work. He told no one. He did not think of himself as a hero. He genuinely, simply did not frame it that way. He had seen someone who needed help and he had been there and he had done the only thing that made any sense to do. He would have done the same for anyone. He went home that evening, made Lily pasta with butter because she had been asking for it all week, helped her with a worksheet about butterflies, read her 2 chapters of the chapter book they had been working through together, tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and then sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea he let go cold, staring at nothing, still feeling the ghost of those 4 minutes in his hands. In the hospital, Diana Harlow woke up 12 hours later in a white room with the sound of monitors beeping and a doctor standing at the foot of her bed with the careful, measured expression that doctors wear when they are about to deliver news that will rearrange a person's understanding of their own life. She had experienced a cardiac event, he told her, a sudden arrhythmia, dangerous, potentially fatal. She had been very lucky. Someone had performed CPR on her in the park, had kept her alive until the paramedics arrived. Without that intervention, the doctor said quietly, she would not be in this room having this conversation. Diana stared at the ceiling after he left. She was a woman who prided herself on control, on knowing the variables, on anticipating outcomes. And here she was, alive because of something entirely outside her control, because of a stranger who had happened to be in the same park at the same moment, who had known what to do and had done it without hesitation. She found that she could not stop thinking about it. Not with gratitude exactly, not yet. The gratitude came later, but with something more unsettling, something that cracked the clean surface of the story she had been telling herself about her own life. Her assistant Priya was the first person to arrive at the hospital, frantic and pale, and after her came her COO Richard, and then 2 board members, and then a PR consultant who wanted to know if Diana wanted to control the narrative because someone had filmed part of it and posted it online and it was already spreading. Diana had looked at the PR consultant and said, in a voice that was quiet but absolutely unambiguous, that she wanted the name of the man who had saved her life. That was all she wanted. Just the name. The paramedics had it on the report. Marcus Webb. Address on file. The police had also taken a brief statement from him at the scene. Within 48 hours of Diana being released from the hospital against medical advice because she had meetings she could not miss, though she did cancel the London call and rescheduled 3 other things, which for Diana constituted something close to surrender, her assistant had tracked down an address. Diana stood outside the address, which turned out to be a mid-rise apartment building in a neighborhood that was working class and lived in and quiet in the particular way of places where people are too tired by evening to make much noise. She had no idea what she was going to say. She had rehearsed several versions of a speech in the car on the way here and discarded all of them. She was standing at the intercom panel when the front door swung open from the inside and a small girl with 2 uneven pigtails and a gap in her smile came barreling out with the full-body commitment of a child who has somewhere important to be, nearly colliding with Diana's legs before stopping and looking up with enormous brown eyes. Sorry, said Lily Webb very seriously. I didn't see you. That's all right, said Diana equally seriously, because something about the child's gravity demanded it. Are you here to see someone? Lily asked because she was 7 and had not yet learned not to ask questions. I'm looking for Marcus Webb, Diana said. Lily considered this. That's my dad, she said. He's upstairs. He's making soup. You should come in. And she held the door open with the confidence of someone who had decided the matter was settled, and Diana, who had run a company worth $800 million, found that she could not argue with a 7-year-old holding a door open, so she went in. Marcus opened his apartment door to find Diana Harlow standing in his hallway, and for one long moment neither of them said anything. He recognized her, not from before, not from the park because he had never actually known her face, but from the news cycle that had picked up the story. Her assistant's name had been mentioned somewhere, her company's name. He had put it together quietly, privately over the past 2 days, and then deliberately not thought about it, the way he deliberately did not think about many things that seemed like they belonged to a world that had nothing to do with his. She looked different without the blazer, without the severe bun. She was in a coat and her hair was down and she looked, frankly, like someone who had recently been very frightened and had not quite recovered the full armor of herself yet. She looked, Marcus thought with some surprise, like a person. Just a person. Mr. Webb, she said.
I'm Diana Harlow.
You saved my life. Marcus leaned against the door frame. I heard you were doing well, he said.
I'm glad.
She had expected many things. Emotion, perhaps. Awkwardness, certainly. Demands for recognition or compensation, possibly. Her PR team had warned her about this. She had not expected simple, uncomplicated gladness. She felt something shift in her chest and was not sure if it was the residual tenderness from the cardiac event or something else entirely. "May I come in?" she asked. He stepped back and opened the door wider, and she walked into an apartment that was small and warm and overwhelmingly alive with the evidence of a child. Drawings on the refrigerator, a stuffed rabbit on the couch, a pair of tiny shoes by the door, a bookshelf with both adult novels and picture books arranged without any particular logic. It smelled of soup and something warm and faintly of the crayons that were spread across the kitchen table where Lily had settled herself back into her drawings as though important company arrived every day. Diana sat at the kitchen table because Marcus gestured to a chair and she sat, and Lily leaned over without looking up from her drawing and said, "Do you want to see my dragon?" and held up a picture of something red and elaborate and clearly very powerful. Diana said, "It's magnificent," and Lily said, "I know," and went back to coloring. Marcus poured her a cup of tea without asking and set it down in front of her, and then he sat down across from her, and the conversation that began in that small warm kitchen was like nothing Diana Harlow had experienced in a very long time. He did not ask her about her company. He did not seem particularly impressed by who she was in the way that most people were impressed, that slightly tilted, slightly deferential way that she had grown so accustomed to that she barely noticed it anymore except in its absence. He talked to her the way someone talks to a neighbor, level and quiet and real. She asked him why he hadn't come forward, why he hadn't said anything after the story broke, and he looked at her with those tired, warm eyes and said that it wasn't his story to tell. She had survived. That was the whole story as far as he was concerned. She asked him about Lily, and the change in his face was immediate and unmistakable. It was the way a light comes on in a room that has been dark, sudden and complete. He talked about her the way people talk about the one true thing in their lives, with a tenderness so undisguised that Diana, who had not cried in longer than she could remember, felt the specific pressure behind her eyes that precedes tears and had to look down at her tea. She did not stay long, perhaps 40 minutes. She thanked him properly and without theater, and he accepted the thanks with the same simple directness that he seemed to bring to everything. At the door, Lily hugged Diana around the legs, unprompted and total, the way only children hug, without any calculation or reserve. Diana stood very still for a moment, looking down at the top of Lily's pigtailed head, and felt something she could not name and would not think about until she was back in the car and already 3 blocks away. She thought about it then. She thought about it for a long time. What happened over the following weeks was gradual and then sudden, the way many important things happen. Diana sent a formal letter of thanks. Marcus sent a brief, polite reply. Diana's company donated to the paramedic service that had responded that morning. Diana also, quietly and without announcement, set up a small educational trust in Lily's name. Nothing ostentatious, nothing that would embarrass Marcus, just something tucked away for the future. She told herself this was the appropriate, proportionate expression of gratitude from someone in her position. She told herself this more than once, which was perhaps a sign that she did not quite believe it. She found herself thinking about that kitchen, the soup, the drawings on the refrigerator, the rabbit on the couch, the way the whole apartment felt occupied, inhabited, alive in the way that a place feels alive when it is genuinely and completely someone's home rather than just where they sleep. Her own apartment, 42 floors above the river, beautifully designed and precisely maintained, felt very different when she thought about it by comparison, and she tried not to make that comparison and kept making it anyway. She ran into Marcus 6 weeks later, entirely by accident, in the park where it had happened. She was walking through it for the first time since that morning, making herself do it the way you make yourself do things that frighten you, and he was there with Lily on a Saturday, pushing her on a swing with the absorbed patience of someone who would push the swing for as long as it took. Lily spotted Diana before Marcus did and shouted her name across the park. She had apparently retained perfect memory of the woman who had called her dragon magnificent, and Marcus looked up and the expression that moved across his face in the instant before he controlled it was something Diana filed away carefully in a part of herself she rarely visited. They walked together through the park after that, the 3 of them, Lily narrating everything she saw with the confident expertise of a 7-year-old naturalist. This tree, she informed them, was probably 400 years old, and this duck was definitely the smartest duck in the pond, and that cloud looked exactly like a horse except for the part that looked like a sandwich. Marcus caught Diana's eye over Lily's head at one point, and they both struggled not to smile and both failed. And it was the first time Diana had laughed in the way she had forgotten, unguarded and completely real, and she felt it in her whole chest like warmth returning to something that had been cold for a very long time. But here is where the story takes a turn that broke something. Because there was something Marcus had not told Diana. Something he had not told anyone in his neighborhood. Not his supervisor, not the few friends he had. Something he had been quietly, methodically managing for months before October the 3rd, in the careful, private way that he managed everything difficult in his life. 3 weeks after that afternoon in the park, Diana received a letter through her assistant from a legal firm she did not recognize. It was from Marcus. Not a personal letter, a formal one, routed through a legal address, and what it said was brief and final. He and Lily were relocating. He had found steady work in another city, better paying, more stable for the long term. He wanted to thank her for her kindness. He wished her well. He hoped she was continuing to recover. He had included, carefully resealed in a separate envelope, the notification she had sent him about Lily's educational trust, with a note attached that said simply, "I am grateful, more than I can say, but I cannot accept this. Please direct it somewhere it is needed. Thank you for everything." Diana sat with that letter for a long time. She had her assistant try to reach him. The phone number on file was disconnected. The address was already vacated. The landlord confirmed he had given notice a month prior. There was nothing. He was simply gone, quietly and completely, the way he had been quietly and completely present on the morning of October the 3rd. There when it mattered, vanished when it was over. She did not understand it. She was angry and then hurt and then thoughtful in the way that hurt sometimes transforms into if you let it, if you are honest enough with yourself. She thought about what she knew of him. She thought about the apartment, the careful frugality of it, the precise maintenance of a life built for one income and the needs of a child. She thought about the odd jobs on weekends, the construction work, the tired eyes that still held warmth. She thought about something he had said in passing during their walk in the park, something she had registered but not fully examined in the moment, that things had been a little uncertain lately, that he was working through some options. She had not asked him what he meant. She had let it pass. And then she did something that Diana Harlow, the CEO, the formidable, the relentless, would normally never do. She made phone calls not to advance a business interest but to find a person. She spoke to his former supervisor, who told her, with some bewilderment at being called by Diana Harlow personally, that Marcus had been a reliable worker, one of the best, and that he had resigned about 5 weeks ago. She spoke to Lily's former school, where the administrative secretary, after some persuasion, confirmed that Lily had been withdrawn and records had been forwarded to a school in a city 3 hours north. She found the city. She found the district. She did not find an address. He was careful, she understood now, he was private by nature and careful by circumstance. But she found a phone number through a mutual contact, a man who did handyman work who had Marcus's number from a job they had once shared. She called it on a Wednesday evening, sitting at her desk at the company with the city lights spreading out below her window, 42 floors up and completely alone in the building because it was 9 o'clock and everyone else had gone home. He answered after 3 rings. She could hear Lily in the background, the bright sound of a child who has no idea that the world is difficult, asking her dad something about whether dinosaurs could swim. "You left," Diana said. There was a pause. "Yes," said Marcus, without saying goodbye. Another pause, longer. "I didn't know how," he said. And then, very quietly, "I thought it would be easier." "For who?" Diana asked. He didn't answer immediately. She heard him move somewhere, heard the background sound of Lily's voice diminish slightly, heard a door close softly. When he spoke again, his voice was low and careful. He told her then, the thing he had not told her, the thing he had been carrying. That 6 months before October the 3rd, he had been diagnosed with a condition in his heart. Not life-threatening with proper management, the doctors had been clear about that, but requiring surgery that he could not yet afford, that his insurance did not fully cover, that he had been saving towards slowly and systematically while making sure Lily knew nothing about it, while maintaining every ordinary routine so that her world felt stable and continuous and safe. He had moved north because there was better-paying work and a surgical center there with a program for people in his situation, and he was on the waiting list and he expected to be scheduled in the spring. He had left, he told her, because he did not want to be a burden to her. Because he knew the difference between the world she inhabited and the world he inhabited, and he had no interest in blurring that line in a way that made things complicated for either of them. Because he was a private man who had always solved his own problems, and the idea of his situation becoming something she felt obligated to address was genuinely unbearable to him. And because, he said, in a voice that was so quiet she had to press the phone harder against her ear to hear it clearly, because he had started to feel things when he was around her that he did not have the right to feel, given everything, given all of it, and the most honest and the most decent thing he knew how to do was to remove himself before it became something he could not manage. Diana had been running a company worth $800 million for 14 years. She had negotiated with some of the most difficult people in the business world. She had held herself together through things that would have destroyed other people. She sat at her desk 42 floors up in an empty building and felt something in her chest that she recognized from 4 weeks in a hospital years ago, recovering from a different kind of breakdown. The particular ache of a life that has been running too fast in the wrong direction, suddenly forced to stop and feel the distance it has covered. She said, "Marcus." Just his name, with nothing attached to it, but with everything that could not be said in it. He said, "Diana," the same way. There was a long silence between them that was not empty. It was the opposite of empty. She flew north the following Friday, which was something that Diana Harlow, with her calendar and her board and her investors and her 42 floors, almost never did without 6 weeks of planning. She took a commercial flight, not the company jet, and she carried a single bag, and she took a cab from the airport to the address that Lily's new school had listed as an emergency contact. She had asked the school directly, something she knew stretched the boundaries of what they should share, and she suspected they told her because she had mentioned very quietly why she was looking for him, and whoever she spoke to at that school must have been a person with a good heart. The apartment was smaller than the last one, but the drawings were already on the refrigerator and the stuffed rabbit was already on the couch, and Lily answered the door and looked at Diana with enormous eyes and said, "You found us," with the absolute certainty of a child who had always expected this would happen. Marcus was in the kitchen. He came out and looked at her for a long moment, and she looked at him, and neither of them said anything for what felt like a very long time. "You have a stubbornness problem," Diana finally said. "I know," said Marcus. "You have a persistence problem." "I know," said Diana. Lily looked between them. "Are you going to hug now?" she asked. Because in the movies they always hug now. What followed was not a sweeping cinematic gesture. It was quieter than that and realer and better. Diana stayed through the weekend. She met Marcus's case manager at the surgical center and sat with him in that meeting and said nothing except what was genuinely true, that she was a friend, and that she was there if she was wanted, and that she was not there to take over anything. Marcus looked at her when she said that last part, and something in his face changed, a guard lowering in the particular way that guards lower in people who have been standing alone for a very long time. She went back to her city on Sunday evening. She called him every night that week, which was something Diana Harlow did not do for anyone, had not done for any person in years, and found, with some surprise, that she did not find it difficult. She found it the opposite of difficult. She found it the part of the day she moved toward. His surgery was scheduled for the following March. She was there. She sat in the waiting room of the surgical center in a city 3 hours north of her office with a paper cup of bad coffee and a thriller she was pretending to read, and she sat there for 3 hours and 40 minutes until the surgeon came out and told her that it had gone well, that he was in recovery, that everything looked good, and Diana pressed the back of her hand to her mouth in a way that was becoming, she noted distantly, something of a habit when it came to Marcus Webb. Lily was at school. Diana had arranged for a neighbor to collect her and keep her for the afternoon, coordinating it all through a series of texts with Marcus the week prior, texts that had been practical and logistical on the surface and something else entirely underneath. When Lily arrived at the hospital after school, Diana was sitting in the corridor outside Marcus's room, and Lily sat down beside her and put her head against Diana's arm with the complete unself-consciousness of a child who has decided that you are her person, and they sat there together in the hospital corridor in the particular light of late afternoon and waited. Marcus recovered. He was stubborn about it, which surprised no one. He was out of bed sooner than the nurses preferred, doing careful walks up and down the corridor in his hospital gown with a determination that made Diana shake her head and smile. He was home within a week and back to light work within a month. The better-paying job he had moved for was still waiting for him, held by a supervisor who had turned out to be the kind of person who, when told the circumstances, had said simply that the job would be there when Marcus was ready. Diana restructured some things at her company that spring. She hired a deputy CEO, someone she trusted completely, and moved herself into a slightly less all-consuming role. Still at the helm, still formidable, still the person everyone looked to when things were genuinely difficult, but no longer the person who ate every meal at her desk and had not taken a day off since the previous government's administration. She began, for the first time in a very long time, to have weekends that were not entirely consumed by the company. She spent many of them north, in a small city with an apartment that had drawings on the refrigerator and a stuffed rabbit on the couch and a 7-year-old who was now 8 who had opinions about everything and was not shy about sharing them. She and Marcus moved slowly, which suited both of them. Two people who had both been hurt by the world in different ways and had both learned the particular caution of those who know what it costs to open yourself to something. But they moved, surely and genuinely, and with the kind of tenderness that is specific to people who have both looked at the alternative and understood its dimensions. On a Saturday in November, about 14 months after the morning in the park, Marcus and Diana and Lily were walking along the river path in the city where he now lived, the same kind of ordinary Saturday walk that Lily insisted was more interesting if everyone committed to looking for things to notice. Lily had noticed a man with a very small dog, a very large cloud, a bicycle with a basket that had a plant in it, and a stone that she was 90% sure was actually a meteorite. Marcus had argued diplomatically that it was probably granite. Lily had said she was going to research it when they got home. Diana was walking between the two of them, and Lily had slipped her hand into Diana's hand without announcement or ceremony, just reached up and taken it, and Diana had felt the warmth of that small hand and the weight of it, light as it was, and had thought about the morning in the park 14 months ago, about the way the ground had felt under her when she regained consciousness, about that first raw, desperate breath, about the voice that had been the first thing she heard. Present, focused, steady, not panicking, already there. Already there. She looked across Lily at Marcus, who was looking at her with those tired, warm eyes that had been looking less tired lately, and she thought about all the things that had had to happen in exactly the specific order they had happened for this particular Saturday afternoon walk to exist. She thought about the park path she had taken because it was 2 minutes faster. She thought about the CPR course he had taken 6 years ago because a newborn baby had frightened him with how much he loved her. She thought about the chance and the timing and the 10,000 small choices that had brought two people to the same place at the same moment. "What are you thinking about?" Marcus asked her, quietly, Lily having run ahead to investigate something in a bush. "About how strange it is," Diana said, "that I'm standing here." He was quiet for a moment. "Yeah," he said. Then, after a pause, "I think about that too." Lily came running back with a leaf that she declared was the largest leaf she had ever seen in her entire life and possibly the largest leaf in the world. And did they want to take a photo of it to send to a scientist? Marcus said they absolutely should and produced his phone. Diana looked at the photograph Lily directed them to take, of Lily herself holding the enormous leaf with an expression of tremendous scientific pride, and felt in her whole body the specific, particular weight of a life that has been found. Not built from scratch, not designed or planned or executed with precision, but found, the way you find something you did not know you were looking for, in a park on a Tuesday morning when everything that mattered to someone was balanced on the edge of 4.5 minutes. The inspiring message of this story is not complicated. It does not require a diagram or a framework or a seminar. It is this, the ordinary morning you are living right now, the one that feels routine and unremarkable and not especially meaningful, is someone else's most important day. You do not always know when you are going to matter to someone. You do not always know when the thing you prepared for in a quiet moment of private concern, the course you took, the skill you learned, the love you kept giving on the days it was hardest to give, is going to be the exact thing that changes everything. Carry your ordinary days with care. Be present in the park. Push the swing. Make the soup. Read the chapter. Love the people in front of you with everything you have, not because it will be noticed, not because you will be celebrated for it, but because the world is built of these moments, these small sustained acts of showing up, and every single one of them matters more than you will ever fully know. Marcus Webb was not a hero in the way that stories usually tell it. He was a man who showed up. He kept showing up, quietly, consistently, for his daughter, for a stranger on the ground, for the version of himself that refused to disappear even when disappearing would have been easier. And it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. If the story moved you, if it made you feel something you needed to feel today, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. It truly means the world, and it helps us keep bringing you stories just like this one. Thank you for spending this time with us. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other.